It is wonderful to be back in Penang, and not just because there are old, emphasis on old, friends who are here, but also because of the new friends that I have met in this week. I moved to Penang, Pastor Bana, when I was 5 years old. 5 years old. And this was home for us until I was 19, almost 20 years old. So it was a very long time. The place where you spend your teenage years is really the place that shapes who you are, and it's the place that is home for you. And so for me, Penang has always been home. I want to say a special welcome to the La Sierra University Honors Tour Group. We're so glad that you're here. You're sticking with a lot of programming this morning, but just think camp meeting, okay? For those of you who have done camp meeting, the old-fashioned type is where you camp out and you go worship under a tent. The newfangled type is like Loma Linda University Church, where you just dress up and come and do your thing. So that's what today is. It's a special camp meeting celebrating Penang Adventist Hospital, its mission, the people who carry out its mission. And Penang Adventist Hospital shaped who I was. It was a place where I learned service. It was a place where I learned commitment. It was a place where I learned self-sacrifice because of the people that I saw around me who so faithfully gave to the mission of Penang Adventist Hospital. Even though I didn't go into healthcare, I will forever be shaped by the philosophy that surrounded me as I grew up on the campus of Penang Adventist Hospital. It was a childhood I would not trade for $1 million. I don't have $1 million to give, Ronald Coe, to Penang Adventist Hospital, but I can give anything that I have that I'm asked to give, and that's why I'm here this week. So I was described as having given a simple message, and that's the way I speak. I may be the president of a graduate school, but I started off as a grades 1 through 4 teacher. And for me, if you can't explain it simply, it doesn't work at all. So please bear with me as I give a simple sermon today, but one that is no less heartfelt about the character of God. When I was a teenager, there were some other missionaries who were in Penang by the name of Heislers, Ed and Ethel Heisler. Those of you who are old, emphasis on old, will remember the Heislers. They were living just down, it was actually fairly close to the front of the hospital compound. My family lived on the back of the hospital compound, and we were good friends. My parents tended to work all the time. For La Sierra people, Penang people know this, but for La Sierra people, my mom was an OBGYN and the pathologist for the hospital. My dad was the surgeon and the medical director. So they worked all the time. But the Heislers knew how to have a more balanced life. And so they would take my brother and me to do stuff with them. When they went, we went. So one time the Heislers decided to go to Phuket, Thailand. It's about a 12-hour drive from Penang on the roads of those days. And we drove up, crossed the border into Thailand, and went up to the island of Phuket. We had arranged to stay in the little beach house that belonged to Dr. Watson, who was a longtime doctor in Phuket. And it was right in this little cove where we were staying. I guess I should connect here. Looked something like this, but not exactly, because I couldn't remember the name of that particular beach. But that's Phuket, and it gives you an idea. So we were staying in this little concrete house, and we were going on snorkeling trips during the daytime. We were going exploring. There was a little island off the coast there that had what they called Buddha's footprint. Buddha's footprint was just like this dip in a rock, and they had decided that's where Buddha put his foot. So there was a little shrine there, and people would come and burn incense there and so on. We went out to see Buddha's footprint. Well, teenagers are people who like pranks, and we were no exception. We loved doing pranks. And some of us were just kind of bored, and we were trying to come up with something to do, and we said, let's do a prank. Well, the most serious one of all of us was my brother, Casey. He was always very serious. He's very, very smart. He ended up taking electrical engineering and then becoming a radiation oncologist. So very smart, very serious. And we girls decided we were going to do a trick on Casey. So we went out on the beach and we dug a hole. And then after we dug this hole, which was about knee deep, we put a towel over the top of it and we sprinkled sand on top of the towel. So the idea was to get it to look like the rest of the beach. And then we would take him for a walk, and we would walk down the beach, and then all of a sudden, clunk, he would disappear from view. We thought that was a really great prank. So we dug this hole, we put the towel across the top of the hole, we sprinkled the sand on it, we patted it down, tried to get it to look as much as possible like the rest of the beach, and then we went back to the house. Casey, wouldn't you like to come for a walk with us? Well, Casey knew something was up. He knew us very well. He's like, why? And we said, no, just come for a walk. We want to go for a walk down the beach. And we were trying to act very nonchalant. What are you guys up to? Nothing. We just want to go for a walk. So Barbara and I, who were quite aggressive 8th grade girls at that time, we grabbed him by the arms and took off on our walk down the beach. He just thought something was off, but he was walking down the beach with us. He had a crush on Barbara at the time. So it was kind of nice to have her grab his arm and take him for, I just told a secret of my brother's. Sorry, please don't tell him. So he took him down the beach. And then as we were approaching the hole, he just stopped. Did he know it was there? No, he didn't, but he sensed something was up. So we were just near the edge of the hole. And he was not going to go any further. And he says, no, I don't want to go on a walk. And we said, well, let's just keep going. No, he didn't want to keep going. So Barbara looked at me and I looked at her, and we just gave my brother a big shove, and down in the hole he went. It was not as satisfying as if he had tried to walk across it, but it was still very satisfying. So the Bible warns us about this. It tells about this. Let everyone be on guard against his neighbor, and do not trust any brother or sister, because every brother or sister utterly betrays, and every neighbor goes about as a slanderer. Oh, great, Dr. Ginger. Thank you for being so encouraging at our celebration of Penang Adventist Hospital. But have you ever felt, and this is getting very serious now, have you ever felt that God or others have tricked you and pushed you into a pit and shamed you? We've been talking all this week about the character of God. God is great. God is strong. God is faithful. God is compassionate. God is righteous. God is self-sacrificing. And that brought us up to last night. And today I want to share this declaration from the bottom of my heart. God is trustworthy. Specifically today, I want to focus on 3 truths, and I'll take you through them. The first one is this: God is trustworthy even when you can't trust him. What do I mean? Well, hang in there. Second one, God is trustworthy even when you can't trust yourself. And finally, God is trustworthy even when you can't trust others. So first of all, let's take a moment to consider how utterly remarkable this is. All week, I have been talking about the commonalities among religions that give us hints about who God is. There are things that Buddhists and Hindus and Jains and Sikhs and Muslims and Christians hold in common that give us clues that we have gotten a little bit of a glimpse who God is. And we took a look at some of those as we went through the week, seeing the character of God through the lens of our own Christianity, but also the beliefs of other religions. This one, however, is different. God is trustworthy. I was thinking about this and I thought, would you ever hear someone say Buddha is trustworthy? There are Buddhist writings that remind us not to trust others because they will let us down. But nothing that I could find says that we should trust God. Would you ever hear someone who adheres to Hinduism say, Shiva is trustworthy? I've never seen it. I haven't heard it. I couldn't find it anywhere, although I have searched. Would you ever hear someone say Allah is trustworthy? Well, Allah is another name for God, the same God that the Christians worship. But in the writings, I couldn't see trustworthiness of God, just the trustworthiness of other people discussed. When you look for something discussing the trustworthiness of God from the Jewish or the Christian perspective, all of a sudden, loads of stuff pops up. The Jews and the Christians talk a lot about how trustworthy God is. Why is that? What is it about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God that we see in the life of Jesus, that speaks of trustworthiness? So let's move on to the first truth. God is still trustworthy, even when you don't trust him. One Friday evening, usually, let me back up. Usually on Friday evenings was the first time that Dr. Sam, my dad, was really out of the hospital and at home, often at home. And so Friday evening, he would see himself as the one who would do some religious education for my brother and me. And please don't take that as a negative thing. It was always very interesting because those of you who are old, emphasis on old, like me, remember that Dr. Sam did not think like other people thought, right? He thought very differently from other people. And that was the time when we got our religious education. And so on a Friday evening, he would sit around and tell us stories or ask questions that pertained to religious things, and specifically to some of the beliefs that we had taken for granted, but he would shake us up a little bit. So one Friday evening, Dr. Sam was talking with Casey and me about his week, and he related this story. He said, I was walking across the compound earlier this week after trying to save the life of a patient. I was passing the coconut trees and the rambutan orchard, and I looked up at the stars and I shook my fist and I said, God, why did you let my patient die? I was shocked. I was a young girl. I half expected that God was going to strike my dad dead with a lightning bolt for challenging him like that, for questioning him like that. The lesson that our dad was trying to teach us was this: you can ask God very hard questions and he can take it. You can go through times when you don't trust God and he can take it. Job teaches us this same lesson. You can ask God the very hardest questions. Over the time of one day in the story of Job, Job is given 4 reports, each one informing him that his oxen, his donkeys, his sheep, his camels were all stolen by thieving intruders. They killed his servants, and then to top it all off, his 10 children have all died due to natural disasters. All of this disaster in one day. Job rips his clothes and he shaves his head in sorrow. And then, as if that's not enough, he is struck by a painful skin condition and is in utter misery sitting on the ground. His wife bitterly advises him, Job, curse God and die. Doesn't that seem a little bit like God dug a pit and pushed him in on purpose? If all of this happened to you, wouldn't you question whether God was trustworthy? But look at what Job said. Though he slay me, yet I will trust him. Even so, I will defend my own ways before him. Notice that Job questioned God. Oh, that's not it. It was on the previous one. Sorry. There it is. Notice that Job questioned God, and God did not strike him dead. He struggled. He wailed. He pointed out why he should be considered blameless amidst this punishing onslaught of misfortune. He pointed out the utter disaster of his situation, and he kept asking God, why? 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 This question of why is something that we are allowed to ask God. He lets us do that. God is so trustworthy that he can bear our challenges. He can bear us arguing with him, and it doesn't change his attitude toward us one tiny bit. It's okay. Because why? God is bigger than anything. God is bigger than the universe. Why should it upset him if one tiny little creature on a remote planet questions who he is? He can take it. He can take it. Now, let me remind you that when we challenge God and we argue our case before him, he is not obligated to give us an explanation. He is God. He's bigger than the universe, and we're those teeny tiny creatures. We cannot understand his ways. Remember, I've been saying to those of you who have been listening to me all week, God is not like a machine with a slot where you put in one ringgit and you can get out what you want. That is not who God is. There are simply times when we will not understand God. If we could understand God, we would be God. So there are just some times that we can't understand God. But as my father said to us, you're welcome to question God. Just never let it sink into silence and turning away. Continue to talk with God, even if you're angry, you are hurt, or you are confused. He can be trusted to bear that. Sometimes, actually, God will give you an answer. It might come immediately, or you might discover the explanation when you're way down the road of life. And sometimes you will even finish your life without an explanation as to why. There were some things in the lives of my parents and also in my brothers and my lives where we never have gotten the answer. My parents passed away 4 and 5 years ago, and there were some things they never had the answer to. But I will tell you, there were many more things that they did have the answer to, even before they passed away. God, in his goodness, helped them to see the why of some situations which were very hard to understand at the time that they happened. As Job said, though he slay me, I will trust him. Down the road of life, if you and I stay in communication with God, I promise you, you will discover this. God is still trustworthy, even when you don't or you can't trust him. My second point, God is trustworthy, even when you can't trust yourself. Actually, truth be told, we can't trust ourselves. Not at all. You know that. We're all sinful, every one of us. We once had a principal at my academy in Singapore who loved sports. Boy, he would really get involved in the games when he played sports. He cared so much about winning. And we were standing there thinking, it's just a game, Mr. A. It's just a game. He played as if he would get the most valuable player award in some national title and when the game was done. And everybody knew that Mr. A was a sore loser. He was a terrible loser. One day when a game wasn't going well and he was red and he was sweaty and he was into it, he let out a stream of curses that turned the air blue. Now, this was in front of a whole bunch of missionary kids who had been taught to never, ever say even one curse word. All of us students just froze. Our mouths were hanging open. We couldn't believe what we just heard Mr. A say. When a leader chooses to display ungodly behavior, people all around him or her will lose their faith. Let me say that again, because it's not on purpose. This is a natural result of what happens when you do that. When a leader chooses to display ungodly behavior, people all around him or her lose faith. And we certainly lost faith in Mr. A that day. The next chapel experience, he got up in front of all of us at chapel and he apologized to the whole school. But I will tell you that in our eyes, it was over. It was over. Our respect for him could not happen anymore once he had lost his temper and cursed that way. He couldn't trust himself, and we couldn't trust him either. The truth is, none of us can trust ourselves. We struggle with sin. We struggle with self-destructive habits. We struggle with anger, with being selfish. We try to overcome, and still we don't seem to be able to get the victory over certain things in our lives. It's discouraging. Proverbs 26:7 says, many a person proclaims his own loyalty, but who can find a trustworthy person? A righteous person who walks in his integrity, how blessed are his sons after him. Here's the truth. We are sinful and limited creatures in a very big universe. We will never be perfect, and we're not going to make ourselves perfect as hard as we try. Only God can develop us into a reflection of his image and his character. And he does that over the span of entire lifetime. And it's possible that at the end, as you are getting old and you're approaching the prospect of death, you will still feel that you can't trust yourself. Those of you who are here who know my mom know that she was really the epitome of goodness. This is something that my brother said at her memorial service, that Dr. Effie Jean was the epitome of goodness. And yet, not long before she died, while she was still able to express herself, she made a comment and said, "If I get to heaven." And I'm going, Mama, if you get to heaven, of course you're going to be in heaven. But still, she felt she could not trust herself. Or could she trust in where she was going to be? And that was kind of sad to me, but at the same time, I wasn't so sad because I have every confidence that I will see her someday again. And it will be in heaven beside Jesus, which I think she's going to just love. So here's the good news. God is still trustworthy, even when we aren't. When you look back, you can see how his Spirit has been working in your life. The good news is people do learn to manage their anger. People still do learn to adjust their perspectives, change their habits, and become a little less selfish. God brings just the right situations to challenge and exercise us in these areas. So we do make progress over our lives. When we give ourselves to the Lord, when we focus on the behavior change that needs to happen, when we focus on the heart change that needs to happen, we are able to start developing more the habits that will reflect his character. I think David understood this when he wrote these words in one of his Psalms. To you, Lord, I lift up my soul. My God, in you I trust. Do not let me be ashamed. Do not let my enemies rejoice over me. Shame comes from either someone else shaming you or you shaming yourself. I will tell you that in my experience, I shame myself a lot more than other people shame me, just by the choices that I might make, the things I might say, the ways in which I think I'm not perfect. So here is David saying, do not let me be ashamed. Do not let my enemies rejoice over me. In today's world, which is very self-focused and very humanistic, David could have written, to myself I entrust my soul. I trust that I am okay and I don't have to be ashamed. People need to just accept me the way I am. Well, yes, they should accept you just the way you are. But that doesn't mean that you won't let yourself down. Nor does it mean that you won't let others down. Nor does it mean that you won't let God down. We still do things that let people down. David depended on the trustworthiness of God. My God, in you I trust. Do not let me be ashamed. Change me so I'm not having to apologize in front of a room full of teenagers who have just lost faith in me. Change me so that I do not make stupid decisions that cost me the trust of others in my leadership. Change me so that I stop acting in ways that lose the trust of my own children. David said in Psalm 37, 5-6, commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in him, and he will do it. He will bring out your righteousness as the light and your judgment as the noonday. God has a work to do in you and me. When you can't trust yourself, he's still trustworthy. He will do that work, develop you in righteousness, and give you better judgment in all that you do. My third point, God is still trustworthy even when you can't trust others. People will break trust with you over and over in life because people are sinful human beings. People are not trustworthy. That's been hard for me to take in because I tend to be a naturally trusting person. But the truth is, people are not trustworthy. Not even your spouse, not your parents, not your kids. At some point, you are going to find yourself disappointed, betrayed, and hurt. And sometimes they will find that you have disappointed, betrayed, or hurt them. Well, let me tell you about Irene. Irene had a real spark for William. It seemed like things were going quite well. They were working with the youth group at church. He was showing an interest in Irene. That was really cool. And she was envisioning a possible relationship for the two of them in the future. He was studying for the ministry and she was studying for nursing, and she could play the piano. That's what all the ministers need, right? In a wife. She could play the piano. And it was a perfect match. Her friends saw the twinkle in her eyes, and they saw the attention that William was giving her, and they would come by and talk with her about it. How's it going with William? Susie would ask. And Irene would confide in Susie in the latest happy moment with William. How's it going? You and William seem to be like a perfect match. I'm praying for you, Daisy would say. And she and Irene would pray together. I think he's interested in you, would say Joy. And she and Irene would talk about what Joy had observed and why she was coming to the conclusion that William was interested in Irene. And then one day it came to light that Susie, the friend who had heard all of Irene's stories and her heart's desires, Susie and William were starting to become a thing. Irene was devastated at that betrayal. She was angry at Susie. She was angry at William. She got angry at God as well, since he had seemed to be leading, but now it felt like she had been pushed into the pit dug into the sand. It was all a nasty trick by God and by others. And by the way, Susie and William did end up getting married. And there was Irene trying to figure out what happened. But here's the truth. God is still trustworthy even when others have let you down, even when it seems that he himself has let you down. We know that David experienced the betrayal of others. In Psalm 41, he says, even my close friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me. But you, Lord, be gracious to me and raise me up that I may repay them. See, David had some vengeance in his heart. By this I know that you are pleased with me, because my enemy does not shout in triumph over me. As for me, you uphold me in my integrity, and you place me in your presence forever. He knew how betrayal felt. Here's my bit of wisdom for when you are feeling betrayed by someone, that they were not trustworthy. Time will tell. Time will tell. Time will tell that God is trustworthy. Time will tell that after experiencing disappointment that is caused by others, God will bring you to a better place than you could ever have imagined. Time will tell. Your enemy will not triumph over you. Time will tell. God will uphold you in your integrity. You will most certainly find a path to living in his presence forever. David also wrote Psalm 22, verses 4-5. In you our fathers trusted. They trusted, and you rescued them. To you they cried, and they fled to safety. In you they trusted and were not disappointed. See, David looked back, and he saw how God had taken care of his ancestors. And because God had taken care of his ancestors so well and seen them through and made them a great nation, he knew that God would take care of them also. And let me just take a little bird walk right here to say that in 2 years, Penang Adventist Hospital is going to celebrate its 100th year anniversary. At that time, it's a time to sit there and listen to the stories and learn the history if you haven't already learned it. It is so inspiring. And you will be able to say, in you our fathers trusted. They trusted and you rescued them. To you they cried out and they fled to safety. In you they trusted and they were not disappointed. It's a pretty significant thing when an Adventist medical institution has been doing the work of God for 100 years. There are stories there. There are stories like there are stories in your life. There are stories in your church. And in PAH, there are many stories that will remind us that God is trustworthy. My friends, you will find God trustworthy even when others cannot be trusted. He will bring beauty out of the ashes. He did that for Irene, who years later realized that she was in a much better situation than if she had married William. William and Susie did not get more education. Irene did. William and Susie never had children and grandchildren. Irene did. William and Susie ended up in rather mundane jobs, while Irene got interesting jobs that allowed her to travel the world and open her mind. What had seemed like just the right thing snatched away from her at the time was actually a blessing in her life. God gave her more than she would have happened if she had gotten what she wanted at that time. God is still trustworthy even when you can't trust others. You can entrust your life to him. And time will tell that he brings good things from the ashes of pain and betrayal. So let me ask you, has someone spoken ill of you or damaged your reputation? God is trustworthy. He will bring forth the truth. Has someone abused you? God can be trusted to bring healing and actually bring some good things out of what was a horrible situation. And hear me clearly, I don't believe that God condones abuse. It's awful. But sometimes something good can emerge out of the horror of a situation. And so watch for that. I tell my students and faculty at IS all the time, when things come along that are difficult, watch for the good things God's going to bring out of it. Watch for the good things because he always does. He's trustworthy. Even in this difficult situation, he will bring something good out of it. Watch for the good things. Has someone abandoned you? God is still trustworthy and he will never leave you or forsake you. Has someone you love become estranged from you? Oh, how painful that is. God is still trustworthy in granting his grace and his love, and he will stay right beside you. Has someone taken away your livelihood? God is trustworthy. He will provide for your needs. Has someone been unjust to you or to those whom you love? God is trustworthy, and he will assure that in the final accounting, justice is done. God is still trustworthy, even when you can't trust others. Jeremiah was an Old Testament prophet who was called the weeping prophet. In Judaism, he's mentioned with Moses, with their life and their works being presented in parallel lines. I didn't know that till I studied about him, that Moses and Jeremiah go together in Jewish writings. In the Gospel of Matthew, it's pointed out that the life of Jesus was fulfilling prophecies by Jeremiah. And in Muslim literature, Jeremiah is also considered a prophet, which I didn't know till I read about it. Here's what Jeremiah wrote about the goodness of life when we understand the trustworthiness of God. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord and whose trust is the Lord. For he will be like a tree planted by the water that extends its roots by the stream and does not fear when the heat comes, but its leaves will be green, and it will not be anxious in a year of drought, nor cease to yield fruit. You will be stable, you will have no need for fear, and your life will bear fruit when you trust in God. Isaiah similarly wrote about the trustworthiness of God. The steadfast of mind you will keep in perfect peace, because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for in God the Lord we have an everlasting rock. You will be steadfast of mind because of your trust in the Lord. He is your rock. And finally, King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, wrote about the benefits of trusting in God. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. God is still trustworthy even when you can't trust him. God is still trustworthy even when you can't trust yourself. God is still trustworthy even when you can't trust others. The character of God is one of trustworthiness. That is a God that you can relax with, you can rejoice in. That is a God that we can love.